We thank the choir for the offertory. I'm Mike Brown, and the title of my message is Liberating Our Liberties. That famous prolific writer, Anonymous, has left his memorable jewels of wisdom in almost every written language in the world. Often, familiar sayings that have been attributed to well-known writers turn out to be the work of Anonymous, once one researches their true source. One of his gems has to do with liberation. It goes something like this. If you love something, let it go. If it comes back to you, it's yours. If it doesn't, it never was. The quote is sometimes attributed to Douglas Horton, who took it and reworded it like this. If you love something, let it go free. If it doesn't come back, you never had it. If it comes back, love it forever. Nice try, Doug. But the Anonymous original packs more punch and doesn't try to fill in the blanks for anyone who doesn't get it. Regardless, either way, the sentiment has to do with liberation and the courage it takes to practice liberation with love and honesty. My late wife and I thought we had fallen in love with boomerang throwing and hang gliding when we visited New Zealand years ago. We did hang gliding in tandem fashion, strapped to a stranger we had just met minutes before and were now running off a cliff with. We ran briefly on land and then let it go, hoping against hope that it would come back to us. We were told to keep running because if we stopped, both we and our tandem companions would tumble down the 3,000-foot cliff. As Claudia's partner said in his broken English, if you stop running, it will be very, very bad for us. I can still see her legs pumping like some cartoon character running out into midair long after she was away from land. Fortunately for both of us, the land did come back to us and we embraced it lovingly, never again trying to hang glide. But then we took a shot at loving boomerang throwing. As you might expect, the boomerang never did come back to us. So we decided we didn't have enough love and let it go. Of course, Anonymous probably had different life events in mind when he came up with his quote. And the liberation he wrote of has myriad forms in our life today. Even as I write this, the French people are arguing about the liberté, fraternité, and égalité in their country as demands are being placed upon them to wear masks and get vaccinated to fight the COVID virus. Like so many Americans, as well as citizens of other countries, the French argue they should be liberated from having anyone, including their own elected government, force them to do something against their freedom of choice. But this freedom of choice is a two-headed monster that can come back to bite its owner, as the unvaccinated French will discover the next time they try to enter their favorite restaurant for a helping of escargot. And indeed, it was the French who gifted us with our Statue of Liberty. That homage to our First Amendment freedoms of speech, press, assembly, and religion. With the passage of time, both we and the French have accepted the idea that even these freedoms have limits. You cannot shout fire in a crowded theater, for example. And we are currently dealing with the concept of hate speech. The French have banned such things as religious garb worn in public. And the throwing of virgins into volcanoes is now frowned upon in most Western societies. The freedom of assembly no longer tolerates mobs attacking our capital, with murder and mayhem as their goal. But how can any system, family, school, community, state, country, operate if every individual can choose not to follow the norms, requests, pleas, demands of its leaders? The answer, of course, is that it can't. There must be limits on liberty or liberation if a society of any kind is going to operate reasonably. As my father used to say, your freedom ends where my nose begins. So societies agree on laws rather than recommendations. We say, for example, that you cannot drive 80 miles per hour in a 40 mile per hour zone because it is not only unsafe for you, it also endangers other people in your car, other drivers using the roads, and perhaps pedestrians. You have freedom of choice to drive 80, but you can be punished if you do so. As Anonymous said, if you love something, set it free. If you love your freedom of speech, turn it loose to be enjoyed equally without harming others. This form of behavior has become more difficult in these times of social media. But the fact remains that if everyone practiced the same degree of liberation on social media, there would not be a need for policing by Facebook and other platforms. The freedom of speech must not extend to bullying, shaming, or blackmailing in order to harm another person. We must turn loose of those behaviors we think we love on the basis of freedoms. Currently, the world is faced with the horror of the COVID pandemic, and we've had to turn loose many behaviors we love. The liberation was performed voluntarily in some cases, grudgingly in others, and without choice in many. Science has performed a minor miracle by developing a solution quickly and efficiently. This solution can allow the things we loved and liberated to return to us relatively quickly, but it requires large majorities of the world's populations to turn loose the freedom of choice they hold to so vehemently. The solution comes in the form of vaccinations, much as the solutions to smallpox, chickenpox, tuberculosis, and polio did. But people who would use the medicines their doctors prescribe without question regarding the contents of the medicines, those same people are questioning the efficacy of the corona vaccines. Like the 40 mile per hour speed zone example, not getting the COVID vaccination can harm not only the person who is not vaccinated, but it can also harm their families, friends, and strangers they may come into contact with. But the vaccination is not a law, as the speeding restriction is. Wearing a medical mask to protect yourself and others is not a law like the seatbelt law. So our nation and other nations of the world are faced with the dilemma of which is more important, liberty or national health. Perhaps it's time to turn loose the liberation we so value and love. Set it free for a time to see if we can solve our international problem. If we are successful, perhaps the thing we loved will return to us so we can love it again. The interlude is Let Me Be the Change, performed by Emily and Mark McKinney.